And we are back on Capitol Tonight. Well, over the weekend, we got a final snapshot of where those statewide races stand, thanks to polls from Marist and Siena colleges, respectively. Tonight, we are joined by pollsters from both of those schools. Marist pollster Lee Miringoff is joining us from New York City tonight, and Siena College pollster Steve Greenberg is here in Albany. Gentlemen, thanks very much for your time.
Great to be here, Liz.
Pleasure.
Let's start with you, Steve, because you've got these really surprising results about the state attorney general's race and the comptroller's race. They are both deadlocked at 44%, which is just weird, actually. Sorry.
Well, yeah, yes, it is. But you know, you make hundreds of phone calls. You talk to 600 likely voters across the state of New York, and what winds up is Siena's October surprise in honor of Mr. October, Reggie Jackson. 44-44 in the comptroller's race, 44-44 in the attorney general's race. A lot more movement, Liz, in the comptroller's race. In the attorney general's race 2 weeks ago when we were in there, we had Schneiderman up 44-37 with 19% undecided. 7 points moved into the Donovan column. Schneiderman held steady. But 2 weeks ago we had DiNapoli up by 19 points over Harry Wilson, his Republican challenger. DiNapoli came down, Wilson went up. Still have 12% undecided, down from 19, but now a dead even race. And I think the factor there is just the spate of bad press that DiNapoli has received over the last few weeks, particularly in the New York City tabloids and virtually every paper across the state endorsing Wilson.
Plus another $1.1 million that Harry Wilson put into his race and that he was able to buy a lot of airtime. Now, Lee, I know you're not polling the comptroller's race or the attorney general's race.
Why is that, Lee?
Yeah, Lee, that's kind of safe.
So that you could come up with these cliffhangers. I need races that have wide margins. No, we're polling in a lot of other states for the Senate around the country, so we left those to Steve to sweat out. I was wondering, though, Steve, is there a sense of where the undecided are in those races? Because there's a lot still on the table at 44-44. There's still a lot of folks who apparently haven't made up their mind. Is there a sense of where that's tipping?
No question about that. It's interesting. I took a look at the undecideds yesterday and today in both of those races. A little bit of different profile in both of them. In the Attorney General's race, it is very little New York City. It's more suburban and upstate. In the comptroller's race, it's sort of balanced. But in both cases, a little bit heavier women than men, which would work for both of the Democrats' advantage theoretically.
Yeah, but in that AG's race, if you've got more undecideds in the suburbs, that is not good for the Democrats because the Republicans have had the momentum there.
No question.
Lee, talk to us about the governor's race. You actually had, in your race, you have Cuomo-Palladino 56-37 compared to 60-37. So just a slight bit of movement, but really not so much.
Yeah. No, and the problem with Carl Palladino is that a majority of people don't think he's fit to be governor, and that's a really difficult uphill fight if you're trying to get a majority of the voters supporting you. I mean, he's running about even upstate. Cuomo runs up the score in New York City and is ahead in the suburbs around New York City. So the expectation here is that, you know, if the race isn't 20 points, maybe it'll be 15 points, but the expectation is that Andrew Cuomo is taking the oath of office in January.
Yeah, you talk a little bit about something that we've discussed a lot on this show, which is the enthusiasm gap. We've actually talked about it. Sure. It's been talked about nationally. This is the problem for the Democrats, right? It's all going to come down to turnout, as our viewers are very familiar with. And, of course, the enthusiasm is on the Republican side.
Although the gap is narrowed, and what's interesting about New York is because there's so many more Democrats than Republicans in New York, the Democrats have more points to give. So even if the enthusiasm is tipping the Republicans' way, as it is, even if narrowly, it doesn't do enough to offset. Now, in other states and around the country, clearly the Democrats don't have the big registration advantages, and that's why we're seeing huge efforts on the part of President Obama to rally the Democratic base with some success. I mean, our national numbers showed a drop from 23 to 14 in the enthusiasm gap, still in favor of the Republicans, and that's why nationally people are expecting a big Republican night tomorrow, at least for Congress, as there may be in some isolated districts in New York where it's more competitive in terms of registration.
Now, Steve, actually, based on your results for those down ballot races, people have got to be splitting their ticket, which is not something that voters generally have been able to do, traditionally at least.
Oh, I don't know that that's necessarily true, Liz. Look, I mean, for the last 50 years, only twice have the voters of this state elected a controller and a governor of the same party. Look, I think there's about 35–40% of the people who vote Democrat across the whole ballot from beginning to end. I think there's about 25–30% of people, of voters, who vote Republican the whole way across the ballot. That leaves you about 20–30% of the voters who have no problem going back and forth between row A and row B. We see it in legislative elections where districts elect a Republican senator and a Democratic assembly member. So I don't think that's going to be an issue here. The real question...
Although...
Go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Steve, although, you know, the gap between those 44s and where Cuomo is in the high 50s is a lot of ground to cover by ticket splitting. So, you know, I'm wondering if you're feeling that maybe the edge will be to the Democrats in those other down ballot races, even though they're dead even right now. I'm just asking because we haven't polled on those ourselves.
Right. You know, I don't know the answer to that. I think that's a good question. I mean, to me, it comes down to two things. One is where those 12% undecideds go, and secondly, where the turnout comes from tomorrow. Is it the usual what we see, 29–30% in a gubernatorial election? Does 29 or 30% of the turnout come from New York City? Is it less than that? Is it more than that? Where in the suburbs does the turnout come? Is it from the Garden Cities of the world or the Great Necks of the world? I think those are the kinds of issues that will determine it. Plus, also, one other factor, Lee, I'm a believer in political momentum. And right now, it appears that the Republicans in those two races have more momentum than do the Democrats.
Let me cut in here for just 1 second, because I fear that this could become a very long segment of pollster versus pollster. Not to say that we don't like that sort of thing. However, let me ask, because
the big time wrestling is in Connecticut, not here.
You never know, though. We could start a trend. Do you think, either of you, are you willing to talk a little bit of predictions, and what will the factor be in terms of enthusiasm and what that might bring? And I know from your standpoint, Lee, you're not polling in those state Senate races, but that's another thing where we're going to be watching for potential cliffhanger, even some talk about 31–31. So what might the
please don't say that.
I'm sorry.
Don't say 31–31. We can't live like that in the state
it's
if
a reality.
It's dead even.
What am I going to tell you?
Look. Yeah, here's what we're seeing in terms of the turnout, which Steve alluded to, which is very important. We're clearly in New York going to trade some young voters for some Tea Party folks so that the recipe will have a slightly more upstate flavor and it'll be slightly more Republican than it typically is. What that means for individual congressional races and state Senate races where the Democrats don't have a big registration advantage is there could be some incumbents who are going to be retired after the vote tomorrow. So I think that's probably what's on tap, not in terms of the governor and not in terms of Gillibrand and Schumer and those races. And I think to some degree the controller and AG may have a tough time because of the gap at the top of the ticket. I mean, Palladino's doing nobody a favor when it comes to the down ballot races on the Republican side.
Okay, Steve, prediction, last word to you.
Well, just on Lee's point about the enthusiasm gap, we saw that in the congressional polls that we did from the first round that we did to the second round. A lot more Republican likely voter models in the first round. Second round, it seemed to balance out a little bit. But predictions, I agree with Lee. I think Cuomo, Schumer, Gillibrand are headed to easy victories. I think the two down ballot races are going to be tough. The Senate is a district by district, and right now I'd say heading into Election Day, small advantage for the Republicans.
Well, it's going to be very exciting. I'm looking forward to it personally, and we'll be catching up with both of you. I want to thank you in the meantime for your time, Lee Miringoff and Steve Greenberg.
Thanks.